In 39, we're asked to determine whether the function y equals the square root of 1 minus x squared is bounded above, bounded below, or bounded on its domain. Now, because we're taking the square root of a number, we know that the domain of this is going to have to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, if I solve this real quick, I'm going to get negative x squared is greater than or equal to negative 1, and x squared is less than or equal to positive 1. Now remember, you can't really evaluate these the way you might think. If you were to graph this function that we started out with, you would have a parabola that opens downward and has a y-intercept of 1. So it's going to look like this. Now, where is that function greater than or equal to 0? That's on these values in red. So between here, negative 1 and positive 1. So even though this says x squared is less than or equal to 1, and if you take the square root of both sides, you get x is less than or equal to plus or minus 1, you got to be careful about taking that at face value. Plus and minus 1 are key features of this graph, but there's more to that story. So always go back with these quadratic inequalities and take a look at the graph or test values and see what works. So we also know that positive and negative 1 will work in our domain. So if I do positive 1 in the original function, substitute that in, I get a 0. And if I do negative 1 and substitute that in, I get a 0 also. But the other values of my domain that I can substitute in lie between negative 1 and positive 1. So that means that they're fractions. If I substitute in a fraction like positive 1/2, I'm going to get 1 minus 1/4, which is 3/4. And then I'm going to take the square root of that. So the square root of 3/4, which is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. If I do the same thing with a negative 1/2, I'm going to get the same value, square root of 3 over 2. So what is this shaping out to look like? I can't go outside of negative 1 and positive 1. So what we end up seeing here is an absolute maximum at 0, 1, and then our greatest and least values are at positive and negative 1. And then in between that, it basically looks like a circle. And I know that seems weird. Parabolas are not exactly circles. I know that kind of looks like it. But if you were to graph that ordered pair over 1/2 and up the square root of 3 over 2, guys, you would actually see half of the unit circle taking place. You may remember these values. 1/2 square root of 3 over 2 is on your unit circle at 60 degrees. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. But for now, hopefully you can see that this function is going to be bounded because I can draw a horizontal line above and below it that this function is never going to cross. The definition actually says there is a y value that's greater than all the y values in the function and a y value that's less than all the y values in the function. So you can easily find those values in number 39. So a little bit more tricky than we'll see on the quiz or the test, but that's how you would do without a graphing calculator if you needed to.